Will you pray with me? Oh God, out of the busyness of our lives, or even the emptiness, out of the noise that fills our ears and our souls, we turn to you. In these moments, grant us your stillness, your peace. And out of the silence, let us hear your voice, speaking clearly to each one of us and to all of us together. And then, having heard, give us courage to follow. In the name of Christ. Amen. The day after Hurricane Bob hit New England in 1991, I took my two sons, ages 10 and 13, to climb their very first mountain. Maybe it was not the smartest move I've ever made as a parent, but after being cooped up in my parents' small camp for 2 or 3 days with 4 adults and 3 children, well, desperate times call for desperate decisions and desperate actions. Situated along the Maine-New Hampshire border, we were close enough to the coast to experience the hurricane's outer wall. The day before, we had listened to the rain pound the cabin for hours on end, watched a steady dose of 50-plus mile-an-hour winds sway and bend the 80-foot tall pine trees that surrounded the camp, then watched the power blink off sometime in the afternoon and remain off for the duration of the night. So when the next morning dawned with sunshine and no rain, it was time to make a break for it. The boys and I drove north for an hour or so toward the White Mountains, toward Mount Shikora in particular, the first mountain I remember climbing as a kid, a perfect family-sized mountain, tall enough to count as a real mountain, yet climbable in a fairly straightforward 2 to 3 hours. Even so, it didn't take long for the boys to begin huffing and puffing and complaining and wanting to turn back. I knew they could outvote me at any moment and call for a sit-down strike, but I decided to call their bluff, pull rank, and order them to keep marching. In part because we had not yet even reached the far end of the parking lot. True story. Not even the first step on the trailhead upward. I can't tell you how many times we repeated that dance over the rest of that morning, with the boys insisting on giving up and quitting at every moment, and my refusing to accept their letter of resignation. In the back of my mind, I knew that we might have to give up and turn back without reaching the summit, in part because 2 days of heavy rain had left their mark on the trail, making the rocks slick, leaving puddles on the path, creating streams of water running across and alongside the trail, washing out and redepositing the gravel, all making the climb slower and more difficult than I recalled. Finally, however, after coaxing and cajoling and encouraging them to keep going, and even convincing them and myself multiple times that the top of the mountain was absolutely around the next corner, the tree line fell away, the rocky summit came fully into view, and the two of them scrambled and sprinted up the rock face like seasoned mountain goats. Then, to my utter astonishment, I watched their eyes and hearts explode as the world in all its splendor and glory lay spooled around them in every direction. What captivated them in that moment wasn't just the panoramic postcard view that splayed out below them. Those images were a dime a dozen in every tourist trap. No, it was something deeper and grander. The wonder and beauty, the awesomeness and sacredness, not just of planet Earth, but of life itself. Surely something on that order is what Jesus' disciples experienced that day on the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus, right before their very own disbelieving eyes, is transformed into a larger-than-life figure, shimmering with the radiance of God and standing side by side with Moses, the lawgiver, and Elijah, the prophet. I can't blame Peter for what came next. For under the circumstances, I would have babbled too. Wouldn't you? What's become very clear to me in both last Sunday's gospel reading and today's is that if Peter is the rock upon which the church is built, as Jesus says, then Peter stands as an object lesson and case study for us of the mistakes that the church is prone to make to this very day. Last week it was our desire to avoid the way of the cross, to avoid suffering, struggle, hardship, and even death itself. Today, Peter models for us the church's eternal tendency to package, homogenize, and sanitize raw encounters of the divine, to objectify, quantify, and even monetize genuine experiences of God, to localize God, pin God down, hem God in, to manufacture and sell selfies of God, if you will, as if second or third hand-me-down accounts are good enough. Whenever we find ourselves trying to work the angles and treat God as some kind of exhibit or someone who jumps at our command, then we need the same kind of intervention Peter received that day atop the mountain peak. The voice of God breaking through, telling us to shut up and listen. It's hard to hear that voice, God's voice. When we are busy trying to run the show, or when we catch ourselves protecting, preserving, and clinging to the past at the expense of fresh new experiences of the living God that will almost surely always turn our world upside down and inside out. Wynne Collier, the author of this year's Lenten study book, suggests that we need to be wary of any preacher who doesn't bring a sense of curiosity, wonder, and even uncertainty into the pulpit with him or herself, for absolute certainty, he says, is too often a smokescreen for insecurity and fear. But what's true for the preacher is true for all of us. A little wonder and curiosity go a long, long way. David was a college professor when that came home to him. Not just any college professor, but a math professor, which meant his life was built around numbers, formulas, equations, proofs, where things are black and white, right and wrong, at least until the day his world exploded and became filled with wonder and mystery. Out for his usual early morning walk, he passed an open field where a flock of birds was roosting. As he watched, the flock took off as one, as if on cue. They rose to the sky as one, circled the field as one, and then landed back down on earth as one. And throughout it all, David stood motionless and transfixed, as if all the rest of the world had disappeared, and he had become one with the flock of birds, simultaneously able to see the uniqueness and singularity of each individual bird, while marveling at the synchronized grace and beauty of their collective flight. For days and weeks and months afterward, David found himself haunted by that vision, a vision that caused the whole universe to shimmer in beauty and delight for him. A vision that gave him a sense of unity with all creation and with the Creator who stands behind it all. A vision that he sought longingly but unsuccessfully to replicate as he passed that field again each subsequent morning. But such moments do not need to be replicated to work their magic. They are, in fact, self-validating. And the transfiguration they work is unforgettable, even if rational explanations fail, as they did for my friend Dave, and for Peter, and James and John, that day on the mountain. Sunday school lessons, personal and social moral codes, memorized Bible verses, theological treatises, all have their place. But they can never substitute or replace a genuine, heartfelt, mystifying experience of God, the Holy One, the Eternal One. If you've ever had such an experience, you know of what I speak. And if somehow you have not had that moment in your life, I have simply two things to say to you. First is to trust and believe enough that you keep your eyes and your ears and your soul open to the possibility that it can happen for you too. And second, to learn, as Peter and James and John did, that such moments most often come when we are totally out of our comfort zone, out of our natural environment, plucked by Jesus from the Sea of Galilee. They stood atop Mount Hermon, some 9,000 feet up, with their heads in the clouds like fish, totally out of water. And for us to experience the fullness of God's glory and mystery, and for us to see the beauty and wonder of our life and all of life, it may take the same experience of stepping out of our safety and comfort and familiarity, trusting that what we see and hear and experience is of God and will make us into new creations. May it be so. May it be so.